So good afternoon to all. Thank you, Sarah, for this presentation, which has covered quite a lot of ground. So I can reduce or shorten my introduction. I was expecting other people to join me on stage. I feel a bit lonely here. So we have 1 hour to talk about the support to households in precarious situations. And how this action can be supported financially. In France, they have recorded 3.1 million households in precarious conditions, spending over 1/3 of their income on energy. It means that the poorest family have 1,500 euros per family per month. So that's the budget they have. And half of these households are tenants, which means that if you are in a poor energy building, you will not be allowed to live in these buildings, because these are so you end up being with low income and the fear of losing your flat because it is not complying with the new energy regulations. Homeowners who live in their homes, those who are in a precarious situation, living in, 2/3 of them would not be eligible for a bank loan. That's a lot. So what do you do to help these households? Because otherwise you pile up vulnerabilities upon other vulnerabilities. There's some, in 2023, it was on Sarah's slides, 70,000 renovations were completed, 6,500 of which through the SERAFIN network. But there are still several million people in a situation of need, and it will take half a century to address these people if we carry on at that rate. So here we have Alexandre representing the National Association of Builder Compagnons, Franck, a part of the Habitat network, for SOLIHA for l'Habitat, and Gilles Berhault is here for Stop Energy Exclusion Association. I will not keep the microphone any longer and let you tell us about what your structures and organizations do to address the situation of the most precarious households in terms of energy. So, thank you, and thank you for organizing this event. I thought I would be coming last, actually, because the three organizations next to me are part of the same collective. And I also like to greet the fact that many members of this network are present in the room, because if we want to upscale or massify, as some people say, because the good examples need to be massified, but tackling the 500,000 households that are needed, well, that's an issue that cannot be tackled alone. I see Myria from Besançon in the room, Florence, Vincent Levrand, Julien Diodanis, Benoit from Marseille. So it's because we're working together that we succeed. And it's not about words, it's real action, field experience. We have 60 members in our network. We have a 5-point strategy because we have developed a scenario as to how to get there. Of course, this is based on studies. It's about eradicated energy exclusion by 2030. We're convinced we can get there, but supporting these people takes training. We've had 105 hours of training for certain people already, but we're far off the mark. We'll need 10,000 people to be there to act in support of these precarious homes, so we're far off the mark still. And with my friends here, we'll talk about but we've gone about 50% of the way. So the question of skills, training, do we need territorial coordinators? Perhaps. So we've managed to have a C2Z program with 15,000 euros, supporting some 3,000 families in real difficult conditions. For this, we need to share in the territories, but beyond that, we're trying to share the success stories, the tricks, and we have people from businesses like Schneider, EDF, and Leroy Merlin, DIY operators, etc. We need to work together, and so we've developed this job. We've created a fund. There are other funds. We can only fund 250 homes, but 250 times the 5,000 euros is already quite a lot. But we are about to launch a new campaign next fall with Emmanuelle Béard, the actress, as the ambassadress to this. And the other point is that, globally speaking, when you start saying that we are going to rescue hundreds of thousands of people from energy precariousness, nobody believes in this, but we need to do something about it. So for this to succeed, we have a number of campaigns scheduled, but most importantly, you need to get the training, because many people think they can help the families, but we realize that it's not that easy. There are so many factors to take into account that it's very difficult to do the job of coaching these families for energy renovation. So we have planned a session on the 19th of June in Marseille. So if you're ready to come and share the successful experiments, please do join us on the 19th of June. So Eco Habitat, a small structure, somewhat 30 renovation sites per year. But talking about the conditions of these precarious households, we rely on a network of volunteers and third parties, trusted third parties, more from the charities network. And the advantage with them is that they know, they are familiar with the field reality, so they can easily identify the families most in need. So what we tell these volunteers is that these people are eligible for um, some subsidies to conduct some consistent retrofit work on their homes. But there's always the fear of the builders, the fear of the bankers, the fear of this. So it's about trust. In in Latin, cum sider. So it's like getting together and with people in the field that create the trust and the link with the families locally, we can turn to um, renovation operators and also the local builders and or local contractors that we can convince that these households are solvent and that they can be relied upon to engage a renovation process with them. So for many people who are really with 12 to 1500 euros, that's one thing. But we are talking to people who live with 10 to 15 euros per day per head. So how can you, for them, how is it possible to imagine that they can embark on a program of renovation that is worth 80,000 euros? The same goes for the elderly. And for the elderly or the disabled, you have to add to this the need to adapt the homes to their special needs. For these populations who, for instance, elderly who don't want to go to a retirement home from the age of 70 or 80. So it's a question of generating this trust between the various stakeholders and players so that the people who have different financial problems, health problems, or people who have animals who have never left their house because they never went on holidays or didn't go for 30, 40 years, the fact that they will have to leave their home for the time of the renovation is something very difficult to accept. So you need to really coach them and advise them, and lots of different details about the coaching and social support needs to be taken into account for people who, before you talk money, you should be talking about all these social aspects. So there's also mobilization needed with social workers who are interfacing with these families that we need to embark with us.
Bonjour. Donc, moi, je représente le réseau SOLIHA.
Hello,
Solidaire pour l'habitat.
I
Nous sommes une
represent
fédération
a
de 130
federation of
associations qui
124
intervenons sur tout le territoire
associations
français, donc à la
intervening
fois en
throughout
métropole et en
the
outre-mer.
French territory.
Et nous sommes une
And
association
we
historique.
are an
Les
association,
associations ont fêté plus de
in
80
fact,
ans
that has been working
d'existence. Et notre
for
enjeu a toujours
many
été
years now.
d'accompagner les ménages pour la
And the goal
rénovation
is
de leur
to
habitat.
accompany, in
Donc, nous
fact,
intervenons dans le cadre d'une
to
approche globale de
accompany
l'habitat, donc à
families
la
who
fois la rénovation
submit
énergétique,
a request
la
for,
lutte contre l'habitat
you
indigne,
know,
mais
for
aussi des enjeux
energy
de
renovation, but also for adapting, you know, adapting homes to new conditions. There's also the need to do away with their sometimes squalor and unsanitary conditions in these housing. As far as the energy poverty is concerned, this energy insecurity, there's a real challenge of working for climate justice and social justice. The households that we accompany are those which are really in the target group, you know, with regards to income levels. Generally speaking, if we look at our figures, 70 to 80% of these households are extremely modest in terms of their income level. In 2022, we accompanied 100,000 households, 4,000 for which it was important to create a certain awareness, and there are 60,000 that we accommodate for work on their homes, their, for the most part, renovation and energy. And then there was also work for the adaptation of the housing to their needs for social, medical reasons as well. And
sortir de la précarité
to
énergétique,
get out
de
of
travailler aussi
energy
sur l'ensemble des
insecurity
parties.
or poverty
Et pour
implies
cela, nous
working on
accompagnons les propriétaires occupants,
all of
nous
the
accompagnons aussi les
stakeholders,
copropriétés
the
et les
owner
copropriétaires
residents, but
bailleurs.
also the owners
Et
who
à
rent.
SOLIHA, nous avons
And
l'enjeu, enfin,
at
l'enjeu est d'essayer d'apporter des
SOLIHA,
solutions
we have in
pour les
fact a
différents
challenge
types de parcs pour
to
essayer
find
justement d'être force de proposition sur
solutions
la
for
transition
different types of
du parc énergétique.
housing
Donc,
park
nous,
stock.
nous travaillons en
So
partenariat
we
très fort
work
avec
with a strong
personnes que vous verrez dans
partnership
cette
with a
assemblée,
lot of people
avec
who are
qui
here
s'appelle Demain
in this
Energetique, qui porte
assembly.
aussi
And
un programme C2E by
I know
Women
that
pour
we have had
justement
a lot of program
dynamiser
with
la rénovation du parc de logement
the
locatif privé afin
owners
d'être en
of
cohérence avec les
housing
objectifs de la
units,
résilience,
housing
de la
units
de la
which are
résilience.
in the private sector.
Et,
And
et c'est pour ça que c'est voilà, c'est dans
this
ce
is
cadre
why
que nous intervenons
we
avec
intervene
cette
in this
intervention
framework
intergénérationnelle, à
on
la fois
two
l'accompagnement des
levels.
ménages pour la
We
rénovation de
accompany
leur
the
habitat
household for the
et aussi
renovation
l'accompagnement des
of their
territoires
habitat, but we also
pour chercher des
accompany
solutions
the
pour
local
mettre en œuvre leur
territories
politique de l'habitat.
to find solutions to implement
Merci.
these policies. Thank you.
Parce
Alexandre,
que moi,
so
je
what
raconte
do
la vie
you
surtout
do?
des compagnons bâtisseurs
The
depuis
construction
67 ans maintenant
Compagnons,
qui est les
they
personnes et
have
la
been
dignité de
working
logement.
for
Donc,
70
bien
years
connu
for the dignity
dans les
of
quartiers d'outre-mer et
the
qu'on appelle
housing.
autour
We work in
de deux axes
France,
d'intervention,
mainland, and in
l'amélioration
the overseas
du
territories and
logement
departments.
avec des chantiers
We
de réhabilitation
intervene with
accompagnés, de
the
rénovation énergétique,
renovation
de collaboutillages,
work
de piscines
sites in a
distribuées avec
collective
hôtels,
basin. We
intervention en
work
espace public
with
et
the
l'insertion
solidarity
sociale et
actions
l'insertion
as well,
professionnelle par des chantiers
also
d'insertion
with
et
the
de
professional
formation et bien sûr de l'accompagnement social
insertion
qui est
programs to
totalement intégré en tout cas à toutes nos
reintegrate
interventions.
people
Alors on a un double objectif, l'objectif
through
global logement
jobs
qui
in
répond
this
aussi
construction
aux plaisirs
sector.
des habitants.
We have
On sait
two
que
objectives.
le
We
mal logement
want
est
to
suffisant pour vivre en France à
improve
pauvreté
the
et
habitat.
social et on a
We
eu pas
know
mal
that
vu
poverty and
qu'en créant
bad
des systèmes
housing
favorables et
tends to increase
en
social
proposant des interventions
exclusion.
opérationnelles et
So
adaptées qui
we
permettent
propose
l'implication des
operational
habitants.
proposed
Par exemple, on va pouvoir
projects
participer
which
justement à
mobilize
inverser
the
cette spirale
residents
de
themselves,
démobilisation sociale
and this to
et
reverse
on
the
estime que le mode
spiral
d'habitation
of
accompagné
social
permettra d'accueillir
demobilization. And with the Compagnons, the
alors, le droit
members,
d'habitation accompagnée, là, c'est quoi?
what do we do in our
C'est
organization?
important. En premier lieu,
In
c'est
fact, what we are
prioritaire de
first
l'accompagner
and
puisque
foremost concerned by
c'est bien
is
le
to
projet
accompany,
d'habitat de la personne qu'on
because
accompagne
the
et qu'on
Habitat
doit mettre en
project
perspective
involves
de ses
accompanying the
possibilités
person, the people,
techniques, de ses
and we must make
possibilités
available
financières
the
et
technical
également de sa
possibilities,
situation
see
sociale
what their
et
financial possibilities
réhabilitation
are, look at their
un objectif
social
important
situation
puisqu'on reste
as
sur le
well.
bâti.
Because
Ça
we are
permet
going to
aux habitants
act
de
at the
vivre dans un
level of
cadre
the
beaucoup plus
construction, of course. We're
adapté
going to help
et
the
équilibré.
inhabitants
Et
to live
enfin, auto,
in a
puisque
in a
l'apport en
in a
industrie
dwelling
dans ce
which is more
dispositif, souvent un
adapted.
apport monétaire
And
qui
you
ne
know
doit pas
that
être traité un
very
peu, qui
often
sont acteurs de
these
leur
people
projet
do not have the
d'amélioration de
necessary
l'habitat, que ce soit
financing
en
to
amont, afin
improve
d'élaboration
their
du projet, que pendant
housing.
et même
And
après
so we help
dans
them upstream of the
dans leur
project,
localité.
but
Donc
also
voilà un peu nos
afterwards.
modes d'intervention.
So these are the ways we
En
intervene
rapport en tout cas avec la
with
philosophie
as the
faire
Compagnons
avec,
Batisseurs.
et on
And
fait ensemble puisque
we, in
ce sont les
fact,
professionnels des compagnons
work
bâtisseurs qui
because
interviennent
the
pour
professionals of
accompagner
the
les ménages
Compagnons Bâtisseurs
dans
intervene
réalisation
to
de leur projet,
accompany
donc
the
c'est-à-dire
households
technique,
in the
c'est-à-dire habitat,
carrying out of
mais
their
également
project,
des
We have young volunteers who are doing their civil service who take part in our projects, but we also have volunteers from our association and people close to the households that are accompanied. Every year, we accompany more than 8,500 residents, and we do some 6,500 interventions, more than one third which are going to become work sites for the construction Compagnons. And so there's a real inclusive approach acting at different dimensions. On the inclusive level, we accompany all of the residents, especially those with very low, modest incomes. We accompany all the situations, those who do not fit within the framework of the mechanisms that exist. You know, there are socio-technical aspects to what we do because we transmit technical know-how in our actions. There's also an action of territorial cohesion because cooperation is essential in all of our operations. You know that when a compagnon is involved, we work with the household, and in fact, there's maybe 35% of the work that can be done by the residents themselves. Then we find other people who can intervene with us. There is also an environmental aspect because we intervene to make energy renovation accessible to all. So this is the action of the Compagnons Batisseurs. Our ambition is to go further, you know, to really uh, fight the insalubrious type of habitat. We work with the partners around this table, others in the room here. We try to be, you know, really try to be, you know, clever to try to see how we can help these households, always better accompanied people, so that we do not end up with situations that find no answers. As I said earlier, there's the will to act for everyone, even those who do not fall within the framework of the mechanisms that exist today to help people. So, you know, we try to, you know, 6,500 interventions. I think we can do better than that. You know, 5,500, excuse me, interventions. I think we can do even better than that. We try to mobilize other partners, you know, private partners who enable us to, you know, create these work site possibilities to, you know, have a to show what we can be, what can be done. We were speaking of three pillars of renovation. There's the technical this morning, the financing. Here, there's the question of accompaniment this afternoon. Before we talk of this, can you tell us what is the purpose of renewing and renovating? We know this helps to fight climate change, but does this have in fact an impact on energy performance? Well, first of all, I think that this is the most extraordinary of projects. Do you see any other subject of general interest whereby when we act, first of all, with the poorest to improve their social integration, well-being, scholarly activity, etc., this is both attenuation as adaptation. This also to improve things for the medical sector as well. But you know, when we do this kind of thing, you know, this enables us to create an economic momentum, but at the same time reduce the cost to Social Security. I don't know if we can do better than that. I think that this is probably the most important project of this century because, in fact, we are helping the first the first thing is that helping the most modest, the most underprivileged. And I think that this is really an important part of democracy. Obviously, you need money for this. You have to have the right arguments to see who we can get to cooperate. For the you need to have trained people to accompany the process as well. You can't standardize things here. But you know that here, we think some people say, oh, these are owners. They don't need us. We're going to enrich the poor. Isn't that a problem? No. So if we reason in terms of the precariousness here of the owner and his family. So here, this is the priority that we are speaking of today. Today, you need money, skills, expertise, a desire to act. And there's accompaniment as well, because there are not two families who live in the same way. You cannot standardize. The first thing you need to do is to listen to people. On the question of trust, very often we tend to complain in our silos. Well, it's not my fault, it's the craftsman's fault. It's not my fault, it's the fault of the financial people, etc. Then there's the whole question of suspicion that we don't pay the workers, that we're, stealing public money, etc. I think that the question of trust is something that you have to reintegrate in our accompaniment. I think that all of us as actors have to stop working, in our little area. I think there's a need for a new narrative to show with concrete examples people who have done work, how their life has been transformed, and people who say, well, I'm having my children come home for Christmas. It hasn't happened for like 5 years, but now that I renovated the house, now they're coming for Christmas. And there is also the fact that you can also, reduce, you can save about 7,500 euros per household for medical costs, etc. For these precarious households, no matter who the player are, technical, financial, etc., we can bring answers to people who today cannot even I imagine that they would be able to transform their life and their home. I think that we have here, in all of the elements brought up by Gilles, I think that there's a question of time. When we look at the public that we accompany, the question of time is essential. The time to develop trust, the time to make the project your own, the one that is going to be carried out for these households, and what you're doing in terms of investment. All of this to allow the residents to better live in their homes, to ensure that the renovation be really effective. We see accompaniment dossiers which can last for 2 years before you actually start the renovation work. And this is because there's a certain logic that needs to be followed. We're coming to the heart of the subject, the accompaniment in the framework of a renovation project. There are a number of existing systems for the technical accompaniment of the renovation. The precarious households are sometimes accompanied by social workers. So how do you create bridges between these different people? And in fact, Sarah was saying you need to eliminate the partitioning between these assistance networks. Yes, indeed, I think this is one of the central subjects. We at SOLIHA, we work with multidisciplinary teams. We have a person responsible for the technical engineering, one for the financial engineering, and one for the social engineering. So, in fact, we can use social workers as well and we can have them in our teams. We don't necessarily use them in all the accompaniment of projects, but they are in a position to intervene in case of specific problems and difficulties. So, for you, the question of how to integrate the technical and social accompaniment, this is done at two levels. You know, we have to look at how the different expertise and competence dialogues, how the members of the team can accompany the household. And remember, this is a multidisciplinary team. Then there's the question of the articulation with the ecosystem. You know, earlier Sarah was referring to the project to develop that link, the articulation with the ecosystem. The link, we work at the level of the territory and the household. This is done in conjunction with the social accompaniment, which can be done with the social workers who accompany, you know, the household with the CCF, etc. So this is done already at the level of the territory. At the operational level, we can animate different commissions for specific subjects like energy, poverty, etc. We can thus bring together all of the players, the energy experts, etc., with whom we can exchange, not perhaps on specific cases because of the question of confidentiality. And in that case, the Commission cannot necessarily exchange information on a concrete situation, but we can exchange on methodologies, on various modalities, approaches to facilitate the accompaniment of households which, you know, have that precariousness and that energy poverty and need maybe specific accompaniment. The actor we have not yet spoken of is the local authorities because there's the work of the social mediation. I think that if we look at the different territories, if the city hall is not involved, there's not much you can do. I was, in fact, at a public meeting with two local authorities. And here, in fact, we have the mayor, you know, and the person, you know, is not, you know, they're not sure whether they're going to be involved. You know, in some cases, they're extremely involved and participating in these. But what's complicated is to get everyone to work together. You know, we spoke of silos, people working in silos. We have our habits, we have our, you know, there's a certain competition as well to obtain financing, but it's clear we cannot succeed if we don't work together. But if the local authorities, the municipality is not involved, it is more difficult. Here, let me say that we have just published work on the circular economy. I'd like to confirm here that the territorial approach is extremely important, essential, because even if we're intervening on individual situations, it's clear that the first step is to create a territorial project to better accompany the individual situation. And then this work on the reference, you know, our references allows us to know exactly how we're going to intervene from the technical point of view, but then you have the social dimension as well. And there are some who can perhaps do better than us on the social dimension. And this is why it's important that all of the partners recognize each other's role. And this is why it's important to have the local authorities involved, because this allows you to bring everyone to sit around the table for this ecosystem so as to facilitate your intervention and to establish the necessary links. we talk of social technical coordination, I would say that perhaps rather than train people, you want to untrain people. You want to untrain these social worker who are always, looking at the access to rights, aid, etc. We need to help the social worker look at houses, look at the deterioration, look at the roofing, look at the windows, and ask themselves, when I see this, how can I help people to access the right to have the possibility of improving their home? I see craftsmen who are extremely kilowatt hours in their approach. They're very much into the technical aspects. I want them to perhaps move away a bit from what the technical aspects and ask themselves the question, how do people live in this housing? What is important to be done in this housing so as to enable the people who live in it, maybe elderly, to be able to stay there as long as possible? And what about people who, are have an aquarium, and the energy is cut off or doesn't work, and they go away Friday, they come back Monday, and the fish is dead because the electrician forgot to take into account the aquarium and forgot to take into account the fact that people like their fish. So the technician needs to have a more social approach, have a more of a link with the person living in the habitat, and how do you get the social worker to have a better understanding of the needs, the housing needs that need to be renovated? Thank you. The professionals, your professionals intervene in the family home. So how do you create the trust between your professionals and the family who sees these people entering their home, entering their privacy, their intimacy, and how do you establish a trusting relationship with these people?
Alors, tout d'abord, j'en ai échangé avec des collègues sur cette piste-là.
I know that we have thought about the question, and with my colleagues, we say yes, we have to establish that trusting relationship, but it's not an ultimate goal as such. If you look at the companies and professionals who position themselves on this subject, they too have to establish that trusting relation, that confidence with the household. So, in fact, how are you going to do this when you have this kind of abusive approach sometimes because people are too brusque? So I think that for us, that relation of trust with the household, in fact, is something that can be seen on different scales. First of all, there's the question of communication. Because when you're in an energy poverty situation, we're talking about renovation, which is going to be very expensive, 80,000 euros. For the household, it's a very complex issue. They're going to be in a work site for several months, and the household feels very, very small when compared to this. They have all questions. They say, when you talk to these people, they tell us, okay, when is this going to be done? At what moment, etc. There's a real issue with regards to the communication that is necessary. It, and here again, it's, this implies the role of the local authorities and national authorities to try to explain, first of all, what are the aids, grants available, what are the possibilities so that the household be able to have confidence in the aid system, that it will still be there in 6 months' time, in 1 year's time. It's important that they be able to identify that someone who says that you're going to have renovation at €0 cost, to them, it's not true. That doesn't exist. So the household has to be able to differentiate between the good accompaniment and the bad accompaniment. And this is a national challenge. We've seen this with the hesitation that took place a month ago do we continue with this global and performing renovation or not? You know, we had households who called us and they said, well, should we believe what you say, or is all of this going to be called into question? So communication is a very important element. Then there's also a challenge at the individual level. We, in the accompaniment, we visit people, we go to them, we try to inform the different role people who have a role, the technical advisor, etc., to understand the stakes of the social accompaniment and the technical accompaniment, so as to ensure that we're really able to communicate with the household. And the goal of the visit, when you know how to do this, is to make the household understand that you really understand their concerns. You know that that you are independent of the technical teams, the technical solutions that are proposing. You are in fact looking at the challenges of the housing. If the work does not correspond to the household's project, you have to make them understand the stakes, the obstacles, try to anticipate all of this so as to propose a work proposal which is as ambitious as possible, which answers the needs and concerns of the household. That time of exchange with the household is where we try to establish a relationship of trust, which will enable the household to get involved in its project, make the decisions that have to be made. And so in that trust relationship, there is a need to put the household into a position that it is ready and willing to act. As Sylvain was saying, it's important that the resident has to be at the heart of the project. You have to look at their way of life, look at the situation of the housing, which probably calls for other types of intervention. But you want to bring a concrete answer to an urgent situation. When you enter for a diagnosis and you see that it's raining in the bedroom, well, the point is not here to propose an 80,000 euro renovation project immediately. No, maybe the first thing concerns the fixing of the roof so that it no longer leaks. So, we start with the primary needs, the urgency, and then we move on to other things. So another element that needs to be taken into account and which justifies the time of the accompaniment is those who are suffering from people who are stealing them, people who are, crooks who have, just really ruin that trust that you need. The craftsmen don't really want to work in homes that are totally dilapidated. I remember in a woman who went to accompany a family. She was talking to the family. She felt something moving along her feet, and there was a snake, a 1.50 meter long snake. So these kind of constraints need to be taken into account, And it's essential that you understand that you can see just a bit of everything. So you have to assure the craftsman as well. When you have someone accompaniment, when you have public money, then at least the craftsman knows he will be paid. But that's not intuitive, you have to explain all of this. You have to reconcile all the links in that chain of trust. And for us, it's more comfortable because we work with the SLIM. Then you have the territorial approach. And in both cases, you have chains of multiple players working in confidence. Then you have a chain, and you can work family by family from the first con to the delivery of the project, and throughout all of the accompaniment, all of the finishing work that has to be done, for some, you're going to, the payment is going to include white walls, and some families don't like white. There's also lighting issues that have to be done. So remember, families who are precarious are those who are the most likely to be taken by crooks.
And families, depending on the case, you can't generalize these. Sarah was saying earlier that the classical accompaniment is between 3,000 and 5,000 euros. For a precarious couple, it would be between 6,000 and 8,000 euros. There's a huge gap in the cost of that accompaniment. And each of you have, additional costs. I don't know what you call it. You have to live somewhere during the work. You got work that's complementary. They just did a wonderful energy refurbishment, but you've got to change the bathroom because otherwise it's not going to be comfortable. So the envelope entails other envelopes, and you have to pay for those additional things that need to be done. And how do you do that in your own structure? How do you deal with it? Well, we do DIY is what we do. And depending on the situation, we can call in somebody from the family who can give you a hand, maybe. And, for solidarity, they can involve children or grandchildren or the neighbors or something. There are situations where there may be the elderly or people with health issues that are alone. There's no other solution from the neighbors, and maybe not even from the family. So it can be companies that will step in and step up. I'm thinking of Laurent Merlin or Weldom, where there are actual teams of DIY people that just want to do this out of the goodness of their hearts. That's solidarity. You can do that with local companies. I'm talking about some, brands, but there are also craftsmen who themselves can give a bit of their time to help somebody out. It can be, and we did this in where we are, with insertion structures. We try to get. We try to get a little bit money from the town or from the department to get additional help, because there's nothing worse for people, as you said, is to deliver a renovation with a nice label on it. It can maybe a label B, and to leave the walls in a horrible condition, and the finishing isn't done. And here you have people that are going to say, it's because I'm poor that you don't finish. Well, because finishing is not financed by the public authority. We consider that as a luxury. But with people in difficulty, it's a lack of dignity for those people to not have it done. I'm thinking of curtains, for example. You can't imagine the number of people that are hiding because it's broken down. And you don't put up curtains. It's just not conceivable for people who are afraid of being seen the way they live. And so that requires very often a workarounds. Mr. Bricolage is going to find various ways of financing the work that needs to be done. And when it's done, it totally changes the aspect and the people living there. But when you're doing a facade renovation, maybe outdoors insulation, it shows on the house, but you can see it on the face of the people as well. It's true for women who are going to put on makeup. And for you gentlemen, when you go to the barbers or to the hairdressers, you can see there's a physical dignity that you find again when the house is finished. I wanted to add to this. I think all of our associations are really are gifted, but it's kind of the case. We try to find solutions so that projects can be done. We've created funding tools thanks to the contribution of private funds, and thanks as well to partnerships that we have with associations that are around the table. We also try to find technical solutions to reduce the overall package and the cost of works, and to find solutions for rehousing. We also intervene in occupied sites, and that takes time. It's a lot of additional interventions. we try to be a bit innovative, experiment with things. We've done house cleaning operations to offer solutions to rehouse. We also use our association network to try to find solutions. But be that as it may, never leave a situation without a solution. You need to be able to act effectively to do that. I agree with what was just said. It's true that about the issues, about what's at stake in terms of the cost of renovation, the global cost, in all cases, what's important is at the beginning to identify what can be obstacles. It's for us, it sends us back to several things that are at stake, which are a bit different. About the issue of all of the various visits that they're going to be having to the house, to accompany them during the work, to reassure them, and so forth. We have exchanged a great deal. It could be about exclusion with cohabitation, about the cost of renovation for these underprivileged families. And it's much more important for them than it might be, it doesn't depend so much on the money. But this involves how, we have to see how can we be financed to the biggest extent to make all of that possible. There's a real issue about how to get this specific situation financed by if you use the right kind of financing, which needs to make it possible to ramp up and to get into the operationality of it, it will not be enough. It also implies that you got to work with the local community who can fund, additional things. The way they can also fund visits to work on various things that won't be coming directly. That's a real issue. For us, what's at stake in rehousing people is something you handle separately. We try to be innovative. We try to work in the framework against undignified housing, to rehouse people, even in an emergency situation. Now, we try to negotiate depending on the actual location. You can have places that you can use immediately, but on a one-off basis, or by opportunity, if you like. And there will be things that are at stake to fix things up so you can better develop this type of solution. Now, in actual fact, this can happen, but it has to be a one-off thing. What is that? A drawer housing. It seems kind of funny, but it's a housing unit that can be used to house a family during the actual work process while their house is being fixed. I saw this in co-owned projects. The first housing unit that was fixed, which could be vacant, now that can be used as this type of a housing, a temporary solution, when you're working on the second housing unit. But this is obviously kind of just a temporary solution, a workaround. And as Frank was saying, now there are issues of accompanying the family to find solutions, whether through the family, through friends, in order to work on the house at the time when they're living elsewhere. Now, there's really something at stake here, because when you're doing the insulation of the inside of the house, which is very often, you're going to have to intervene on the walls in the kitchen, in the bathroom, and there's a lot of piping and closets and what else. And sometimes you can't move them too much. Sometimes they're not in good condition. And so you have to redo the installations, and sometimes they were done by the owner themselves. So here, in this framework, it's true that when you're working, you have to have the technical expertise to identify everything that can be removed and replaced to limit the cost of finishings, and to accompany the family to identify their actual capability of funding the residual costs. And for the moment, we don't have a real solution that's already made. This is DIY, it's prioritization, the possibility of reusing, of helping the family to do some of the work themselves. We're not working in self-rehabilitation only, as some do, but we can have some of the work done. But for the renovation to be successful, it has to be finished, so the family can take it over and have it be theirs. And then behind that, the utilization will go well. It's also it's a space for innovation. We talked about innovation, but there are things to be invented. We talked about tiny houses. In Lille, there's somebody who created a tiny house. He makes tiny houses, and he uses them for 2 years in a touristic thing. Once they've amortized it, then they use them to house people. And we work the AFAC, and we're renovating a solidarity housing work for students and for trainees so that we can use that. We're talking about this with a big hotel chain, and this is a legal issue, is to offer charity locations to be able to house people in hotels that are empty during that period. And so, I mean, there are people that have invented things. It's not because, there's a lot of very poor people, and that this is not a space where there's things that can be done, nonetheless. Now, what is certain is that we need to be, many of us, given the extent of the problem. One last word. Well, it has to do with the theme of today. We haven't talked much about pre-financing, but for us, this is an obstacle to developing our action. There's financing of projects, but also everything around the projects. It's a whole question of pre-funding, which is really a source of integration. I'd like to thank especially SERAFIN and Demain, because we need these days to get to know each other better, because we absolutely need to break the silos and work together. That's the only way to go after this. In any case, I'm very enthusiastic of how many joyful structures there are to work around these important social issues together. Yes, we had. So we have finished almost on time. It's not the Japanese hotels with the. Thank you so much for your participation.